Hey there, Danny here. Welcome to my ramblings. So I've been working on my book, and there are actually 3 of them that I have in the works, but the one and the first one that I'm working on, it's intense. I grew up in a house. I grew up in extreme dysfunction. My mother was never diagnosed with anything, but I have relatives that have been diagnosed with things, and I'm sure my mother would have been if she would have pursued it. But I did pursue therapy back in my 20s. I was forced into it in my teens, along with forced into drug treatment centers, and they wouldn't keep me for more than a week or 2 because that was the assessment process, and at the end of the assessment process they said I didn't have a drug problem. I was just experimenting like a normal teenager, so they wouldn't keep me because insurance wouldn't cover it. And she'd keep me out for a weekend or for a week, and then she'd take me to another place. I spent the whole summer in and out of treatment centers. The last place she took me was an adolescent place for respecting parents or something. I don't know. Something happened outside of the room that I shared with the girl that was in there with me. Something happened outside the window, and we couldn't stay in that room, and they didn't have any rooms in that group home for us. So I got sent up to the adult psychiatric ward. Was that fun to experience when you're a 15-year-old child? Anyways, the book talks about the dysfunction. I basically was the scapegoat in my family, and it's a lot. It's crazy. It's really crazy, but the book's gonna take you through all of it. But the basis of the book is to explain how all of that was actually a blessing. I couldn't see it as I was growing up. But because I didn't exist, I was only there to be worthless, and I was there to feel the shame and the guilt and everything else that she had inside of her for choices that she had made, and for past things that happened with her when she was younger that created her this way. So I don't want to get into all like the psychology of it and everything else. I really don't care about any of that. That's not what my point is. My point is we have become, and I think it's great that we're acknowledging victims now. That is amazing. The problem is we're tending to go overboard with it, and it's becoming everybody's a victim of something. And the truth is, nobody's a victim of anything. When I finally do publish the book, because I've been working on it, and this is my baby. I've dreamed of writing this book since I was young. There was no chance. I mean, I started writing this book probably 10, 15 years ago. I started the first 3 chapters. I stopped mainly because I knew enough. I knew what I'd have to deal with when I published it and she read it. So I decided that it was something that I couldn't do to her. When you're a scapegoat, in an extremely dysfunctional family, you tend to play small. You don't open yourself up. You're terrified for people to know who you truly are, because if they do, then they can really hurt you. You learn to live in a world inside of yourself. Your true self is in there. You know it is. You just keep that person hidden. There are a few people in your life that you will share things with, and they will get to know you, but they'll never fully know everything, because you just can't. You can't run the risk of sharing that with too many people, because every time you did as a child, you were tortured for it. It was used against you, and it caused major mental and emotional distress for you. So you live in this world of, these are the rules. I don't fit into these rules because, well, I'm not like them. And you have to make yourself small. You have to walk on eggshells. You have to be careful of what you do and what you say. Anything can be used against you. And I spent a long time playing small. But the one thing that I got from it when I was younger, and that was the weird part, was I always tended to side with the person that was being bullied. I didn't care if I liked them or not. If I saw somebody being ganged up on, I had this overwhelming need. It was a necessity to go and be on their side. To try to take the pain that they're feeling off of them. Because in my mind, I already dealt with this type of stuff at home, so I could handle this at school. I didn't care. Kind of messed up thinking for a child, if you really think about it. I know that I started to break free once I had my children. My mom, when I started to see signs she was doing with my two sons, which she did with my brother and I, at that point I was like, I've got to go. The kids and I have got to get away from her. And we initially moved. We moved an hour and a half north. We had lived in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and we had moved up to a suburb of Madison, Wisconsin. This way then they could still see their father, which their father was involved in their life. If they wanted to go every weekend to see their dad, as long as their dad had nothing to do and he was okay with it, the kids went every weekend. If they didn't want to go, they didn't go. We didn't follow our court order. And the main reason that we didn't was because as a child, and you'll see that in the book, I wasn't allowed around my father after she moved us into low-income housing. And I got to see him for a little bit until he finally moved away. And as a child, I was devastated and destroyed when he left. I was very angry and bitter with him as a teen because I wasn't mad that he left. I was mad that he left me with her. But I was a child. I didn't comprehend that he had no choice in that day and age. So when I had my kids and I was going through divorce, my mother got really meddling in with that, and I had to put a stop to it. And I sat down with my children's father and I said, we've got to figure out how to put our differences aside and co-parent these kids properly. And we did. We managed. It was a struggle the first few years, but we managed. Our children are now 29 and 31, or no, 30 and 31. Oh, I'm sorry. I lied. 29 and 31. I'm wrong. Math's not my strong suit. Anyways, and to this day we are friends. He's actually my friend that lets me use his truck and who has helped me out during this time. And he's older than me, so if he ends up, needing assistance when he gets old and gray and has nobody to take care of him, then I will be doing that. And it won't be a second thought. I won't second guess it or anything else, because this is my family. We may be divorced, but we share children together, and if we can't lead these children by example, and that means that we have to figure out how to get along as adults. And that wasn't easy for us in the beginning. There was some fighting, and there was some normal stuff that people go through when they go through a divorce. But we both knew that we had to figure out how to make it work so we could raise decent, healthy children. And I didn't know what that looked like. But I knew that if I did everything opposite of what she did, then I would be okay. And they turned out great. I've got great kids. But when I started to see the kids, her doing to the kids what she did to my brother and I, that's when I moved away. And then that way we could still be in contact with her. She could still be part of their life and my life, but at arm's length is what my thought process was. We weren't up in the suburb of Madison more than a week, and she showed up with all of her things and had rented a place a block down the road. And then the nightmare began. I was there for a year, and during that year it was just a huge tumultuous battle with her, because she wanted the power and control and I wasn't allowing it. She made a fool out of herself at school. It was embarrassing. It was awful. So at that point I had talked to the kid's dad and said, I can't stay here. And we now know she's just going to follow me wherever I go. So at that point, we had discussed it and decided that the safest place for me to go, because I did not want her messing my kids up like she did my brother and I. So at that point, I said the only place that I can go that she will not follow is to my dad's. And that's what we did. And I didn't speak to my mother for 4 years. The only reason we started talking again is because my cousin Mickey had passed away, and we saw each other at the funeral. At that point, I did allow her back in our lives, but it was on my terms. And the rest of her life was pretty tumultuous. There was a lot of times where she wouldn't like my boundaries and what my rules were, and she'd say some pretty mean, nasty stuff to me and wouldn't talk to me for 6 months to a year. And then when she needed something, she'd call me back, and she'd be the loving, kind, wonderful mother that I always wanted. And I knew there was something behind it, because there always was, and I would always be right. It wouldn't be until she got sick. She had AFib and atrial fibrillation, and she was on medication, but she didn't take it very seriously, and she was not going to her appointments, so they didn't get to up her medication. She ended up having a stroke just like a couple of days before Thanksgiving in 2015, and we almost lost her, and it took a few months for her to heal and recover, and she ended up having to come and stay with me, so I could take care of her after she got out of the hospital and take her to all the appointments. I mean, it was a nightmare. But there was never a chance for us to ever discuss anything that ever happened, because if anything ever got brought up, she would always say she doesn't remember anything before the stroke. I knew that was wrong, because anytime that we did have words and I would tell her, you did this or you said this, she'd say, oh no, you're making that up. I would never do that. And anybody who knows me knows I would never do that. So it took me a long time. I did go through therapy in my 20s, which was really important. That kind of put some things into perspective for me and allowed me to kind of separate myself from the situation. When I stopped talking to my mom for those 4 years, I pretty much stopped talking to all of my family. In the beginning, it was very lonely. Did I miss the family? Yes, I did, very much. But I also knew that if I was going to break these cycles that my family on my mother's side had, that I had to protect my kids from it. And that meant that I had to be lonely and go without. And I was okay making that sacrifice to make sure that the dysfunction that came from my mother's side of the family left. My kids weren't living that dysfunction. And I understand why the dysfunction was there. I mean, my grandfather was my step-grandfather. My grandfather was very, he was a drunk. And he did what most stepdads did to their stepkids in the 60s and 70s. I should say 50s and 60s, because that's when they were kids. And then it was just messed up, and none of them ever got help or tried to heal from any of the trauma that they had been in. So when you don't heal what you've gone through, you're going to bleed it out all over everybody in your life, especially the people that are close to you and the people that you love. So if you don't deal with any of your trauma, hurt people hurt other people. It's just the way it is. So I didn't get that when I was younger. I was too young to understand any of that. As an adult, I knew this. This is probably why I was able to maintain somewhat of a relationship with my mother. The relationship did get better after her stroke. But I think that only happened because my brother wanted nothing to do with helping her with it. I did it all. And I had relatives that came in and helped too. I wasn't the only one that did it. I had her siblings stepped up to help out wherever they could. So the one thing about this family, and I will tell you this, extreme dysfunction, narcissism runs in it heavily. But when it comes down to there's a problem or a crisis, they all do come together to help each other out and to be supportive. The only thing that I didn't like about the family with stuff is they all want to just throw money at it. Here, let me give you money. I don't want your money. How about you come be a human being with me? But I digress. That's a whole nother video. Anyways, after her stroke, I think because she realized that she's gonna die at some point, and she's not married, she doesn't have anybody in her life, she just has my brother and I, and she knew damn well that my brother wasn't gonna take care of her. She knew that I was gonna be. So I think the last 5 years of her life after her stroke, I think she realized at that point that she had to treat me a little differently, and she did. I cannot say that there was ever a time that we had a great relationship. I can tell you that after my arrest, those 2 months that I stayed with her, in my whole entire life, since I can remember as a child, it was the only time that my mother was very gentle and kind with me. And at that time, I desperately needed it. So, and I had forgiven my mother decades ago. And I always knew that this book needed to come to fruition because there are other people out there like me. And they need to know they're not alone. Because when you're dealing with an extremely dysfunctional family and you're you're the scapegoat. You're the one that's the oddball out. It's a lonely place to be. It's lonely. It's scary. It's weird because you have to walk on eggshells with everybody around you. And the funny part was at growing up as a child, nobody would believe me. Nobody in the family. Nobody, the police, when she would get the police involved, which she did all the time, she'd lie about some of the stuff. Some of it she didn't, but some of it she did. And nobody would believe me. Everybody all believed that I was a troublemaker. And I knew I wasn't. But nobody would believe me until I was 16 or 17. About a year or so before my grandmother, my mother's mom, passed. I went to her, and when she found out what was going on, because she didn't know this whole time. I assumed she did because everybody else in the family knew. But she didn't know. When she found out what was going on, I went and lived with her for a few months. And she did not force me to go back to my mother's. And when my mother came over to try to force me to go home, my grandmother told her, you will not force her to do anything. When she's ready to come home, she'll come home. And if she don't want to come home, she's not coming home. She is welcome here for as long as she wants. And I stayed for a few months. It took a while. And my mother played all of her little manipulation games to try to get me to come back home. My grandmother would tell me the same thing every time. You decide for you. Don't decide because your mother's being nice to you right now. Don't decide because you really want your mother to love you and like you. You decide because you're ready to go. If you're not ready to go because you know you're going to deal with her when you get home behind closed doors. If you're not ready to go, she says you don't go. You stay here. Nobody cares how long you stay here. And that was a turning point for me. And then having my kids would be the biggest turning point for me. But I always knew that I needed to write a book, that I needed to share all of this with somebody. And even if that book only changes one person's life or helps one young child, male or female, that may be going through what I went through, and it gives them hope and a light at the end of the tunnel, that's all worth waiting this long and writing the book. This is kind of my baby, so I'm kind of being a bit of a perfectionist on it. I want to be as real and as honest as I can about the interactions and the stories that I'm sharing with you in the book. The biggest thing is I had assumed, because I've done so much work on myself, that some of that wouldn't affect me. But some of the stories, as I'm rereading them and making sure that they're as factual as possible, I start out telling you how I thought when I was that age, and then it goes into me explaining as an adult why I see it differently now. But it's brought up some stuff. So I've been kind of being a scapegoat, like I have been in my family, when things get tough, mentally and emotionally. We tend to go inside ourselves. We really don't want to be around people. We want to just be with ourselves. I don't know if the rest of them do, but I know that I have to sit with feelings. Anger, hurt, pain, sorrow, all of it. I have to sit with it. I have to sit with it as it's my friend and really look at it in order to get through it and heal it. And once I get through it and heal it, then I can look back at the stuff and be like, oh, that's not a big deal. It's just like telling a story then at that point. But I didn't realize that there were some aspects that I didn't quite heal. So this is partially why you've gotten less and less of me lately. And I apologize for that. I'm working to make it so I can get this done. I'm putting a few hours in each day to take care of what I want and make sure that it's where I want it to be. And I will be notifying you when its release date is and everything else. But I basically wanted to share with you the fact that when you've had to make yourself small and you've had to walk on eggshells, it's really, really difficult to let yourself out there and be known. And I as I've become an adult, I mean, Wednesday I'll be 50. So as I've become an adult, I can pretty much tell you that there's been a lot of times as I've gotten older that I've thrown myself out there to be known by people. And sometimes it's gone good and sometimes it's gone bad. But the one thing that I have learned in all of my adulthood with being known and being me is the more me I am and the more I let me out and I don't hide her inside, the more I am attracting people that are like me. They're kind, they're compassionate, they're loving, they're fun. You find your people by healing your wounds and growing and allowing yourself to come out. And it's a long process. But so this is why I'm not always on here with this. And I have had some other issues with my shoulder and then my lower back, but whatever. That's just healing from the accident and I'll be fine. They said it could last for 6 months to a year with the pain on and off. So whatever, we'll deal with it. It is what it is. We supposedly have an end in sight. I'm certainly hoping that it's not lifelong. But who knows? I'm older. I got a clean bill of health, though. That's the good thing. I don't have osteoporosis. I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have high cholesterol. I'm not pre-diabetic. I have none of those issues. I'm actually pretty healthy for being my age. So that's a good thing. But I just wanted to come on here and say that when you are struggling and you've been keeping yourself small and you've been walking on eggshells, it takes you a minute and some time to start letting yourself out and stop doing that. And once you do, the world opens up and you meet wonderful, great people. And this is why I share with you finding your true, authentic self and loving yourself, because it's a long process to go through, but once you get here, I don't think I was extremely happy having my sons when they were born and everything else. There was total excitement there. But other than that, I don't think I've ever been this happy in my life. And I started this journey before my mother got sick and passed. But I don't think I've ever been this happy in my life because I am now meeting new people and new friends. And I now consider a lot of them family because they've been here for me during this whole time with this accident. It's been awful dealing with it. And I have had some wonderful people that have just been they've just been here and supportive, and if I felt down and I was falling down that rabbit hole of depression, I could speak to these people and they would remind me who I was and that this is just a small molehill. It's not really a mountain. We're okay. And that I should be feeling this way. And it's okay. and we'll just get past it. And I'm gonna tell you right now that if only one person in this whole great big wide world I help by my videos and my books, then I will have done the work that God asked me to come here and do. Because the honest to God truth is, I hope it helps more. But if it was just one, that's enough for me. Because I know what that felt like. And I want to make sure that at least one person knows that they're not alone. They don't have to walk on eggshells and make themselves small. That who they are inside, it's a great person. And once you learn to release that, the world opens up and you meet some magnificent people. There are times where I wish that I had known these people before, but if I had, it may not have been the right time for us to meet. So with that said, I'm going to let you go. I've kept you on here quite a long time this time, but I will try to be back in a couple more days. And yes, this first book I am being a bit of a perfectionist on, so it's going to take a little bit. But the other two books, which are already in the works, I've already got a couple of chapters on each of them. Those ones I won't need to be as perfectionist on, because those ones are kind of, they're not as in-depth and what I'm trying to get across as I am in this book. So that's why I haven't fully been here. But I'll keep you posted on what's going on with it. And let's hope. We could get some rain tomorrow, and it's supposed to be in the 90s tomorrow and on Wednesday. So I'm hoping and praying that I get a gray, gloomy birthday and hopefully some rain, and I will be in heaven. Anyways, guys, have a nice night. Love you. Bye.